Hey everyone, this is Ryan and Alex with another episode of Coffee Talk. This is episode number 5, and today we're talking about pre-infusion versus no pre-infusion. So, do you pre-infuse your coffee when you brew it, whether it's through espresso, whether it's through filter, whether through drip? So, that's what we're here to talk about today. So, Alex, what is pre-infusion and do you pre-infuse your coffee?
Hello, Ryan. Yeah, so pre-infusion. So yes, I do pre-infuse my coffee. So whether if I am doing filter or if I'm doing espresso. So I think we'll first talk about what is pre-infusion first. Um, so pre-infusion. So pre-infusion is the process of where you where you just pour hot water onto the coffee, just enough where you just wet the just where you wet the coffee grinds. So basically, you are just making the coffee grinds wet, and it's more of a preparatory step just before you actually start brewing. So where you add the where you add the water afterwards to start extracting the flavors. Um, so in the context of, let's say, if you're doing filter, so let's take for the AeroPress. Um, you would first grind your coffee, and then you would dump it into your AeroPress, and then some people would like to pour some water in. It would just it Like some people would pour water into the AeroPress just enough where and just enough where where the coffee starts and like starts to become wet, and then you stir it for a bit, and then you pour the rest of the water for how much you want to brew for. So that's in the context of filter, and I'm sure Ryan, you would probably know more than me in terms of the AeroPress, but that's from my experience.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, that's right. Well, as you all may know, I use the AeroPress as my main method of brewing coffee at home. And yes, I do pre-infuse. So another term that I think some people have used for this process is blooming the coffee as well. More so in terms of filtered, where you're pouring water over the coffee ground to wet the coffee. So for myself, my one of my recipes is to bloom or pre-infuse the coffee for about 25, 30 seconds or so with about 30 grams of water. And that's simply water that's off the rolling boil. I actually don't know the exact temperature, but it's not like rolling, piping boil that's going over the coffee. So right off the boil, that when the water's calmed down, I poured about 30 grams of water over the coffee ground, and that I pre-infuse that for about 25 to 30 seconds, and then I pour the rest of the water in. And for me, I find that it lets the coffee and the flavors of the coffee really build up in a concentrated bath. And in terms of flavor and the result that comes out from the AeroPress, I find it's a lot fuller bodied and richer and a little bit smoother when you drink the coffee, versus not doing it at all and just pouring the whole whatever 230 grams of water into your AeroPress and then waiting your brew time and then pressing it through. I found that when you bloom the coffee, you allow some of the different flavor notes to come out initially, and then you pour the rest of the water into it so that you're just really filling it with volume after the blooming process. So that's kind of my experience with the AeroPress. But Alex, a lot of people use pre-infusion for espresso too, right?
Yeah, with espresso, I think it's more. I think it's quite. I think with espresso, it's more. I think it's more prominent because with espresso, you're still forcing the water through a bed of coffee at 135 pounds of pressure or 9 bars. Um, So when you pre-infuse, you really want to wet the grains, and you really want to prepare the coffee just to get the most out of it. So firstly, like with espresso, what actually happens when you pre-infuse? When you when you hit the brew button, so let's say if you're using a semi-automatic machine, so a pump machine, and when you pre-infuse, so let's say if you hit the brew button and the water starts coming out, and the water comes out, what happens is then the coffee bed becomes saturated. The coffee bed starts to expand. The water is slowly the water would become absorbed into the coffee, and this basically you are wetting the grains. And when you come to brew, so when you come to hit the button where you would be where you be and where you would be shooting where you would be shooting 9 bars of pressure of water down that coffee, then basically your coffee is ready to be brewed. So as you say, like the results of the espresso, like you would have more body, there's more flavor. So yeah, so that's with espresso, because all that you want to do is you want to wet the grains, you want the coffee bed to expand, let the water be absorbed into the coffee, just so that it's ready to be brewed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, with some of the more entry level semi-automatic espresso machines, and compared to maybe a higher end or more commercial style espresso machine, certain machines have pre-infusion features. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Like there are some machines where they would actually adjust the pre-infusion water pressure. So in other words, when you hit the brew button, it wouldn't shoot the like it wouldn't actually like the water that hits the coffee bed wouldn't be at the brewing pressure. Instead, it would be at the pre-infusion pressure. So usually what see is that the pre-infusion pressure would be a lot lower than the brewing pressure. And one of the reasons why I think that may be the case is if you hit the coffee at brewing pressure, it could potentially disrupt the coffee bed, and that may or like I may be wrong on this, but it could possibly it could yield an uneven extraction. But even so, that would be something minor. But I think the pre-infusion pressure should be slightly lower than the brewing pressure.
Yeah, I think that's getting more into pressure profiling, right? So it's good that you mentioned that the the pressure of the pre-infusion with some of the nicer machines will actually adjust and give you a lower bar pressure. Um, Versus the brewing when it's actually extracting all the coffees that's being extracted. So that's more about pressure profiling, and that's a whole nother topic I think that we can dive into and talk about how it changes the coffee. But so with pre-infusion versus no pre-infusion. So with some of the other brewing methods, like uh, uh, I mean, espresso is one, of course, with some of the lower end or entry level, like prosumer type of espresso machines. You're saying that the pre-infusion stage, it might not even be there. So when you flip the switch to brew, to pull your shot, um, your your pressure is going to be like straight to 9 bar or whatever your machine is set at, and it's going to be consistent at that pressure for the whole time that you actually brew, rather than letting water fall over the bed of coffee for a certain amount of time. And I mean, for example, like a Gaggia Classic, or a Rancilio Sylvia, I think those are really good examples of prosumer entry level semi-automatic espresso machines, they don't actually have a different pressure for pre-infusion. So when you actually hit the brew button, it'll just start with 9 bars of pressure, and then a few seconds later, your coffee starts coming out of your portafilter, right? So knowing that and having that method of pulling a shot versus um, a machine that's higher end, where you can have a pre-infusion time set at X, and you can have the brew pressure set at X. Like, does that make a big difference?
I don't think it would actually make much of a difference. But saying that, I think with a Rancilio Sylvia light, since if I think the differences would be, I think it would be, I think the differences would be, I think it would be negligible. Um, like, I think because as I did say before, the difference is if you have a high pre-infusion, if you have a if you have a high if you have a higher pressure of pre-infusion, um, all that you are doing is you are just quickly saturating the puck, so the coffee bed. But the risk I see would be just to yield an uneven extraction. But even so, that would be something very minor and very small. Um, so what I find is that if you have a high pressure of pre-infusion, all that you are just doing, you are saturating the coffee puck a lot quicker. And for it to be, but the process of the actual saturation may be just a bit too short, if that makes sense. So if you
Yeah,
have a low, so if you have a lower bar, you are allowing the time for it to become saturated would be a lot longer.
yeah,
But saying that, I have seen manufacturers where they want to have a higher pre-infusion just so that you could saturate a higher dose of coffee, because if your pre-infusion pressure is too low, um, then and then you will need to have a longer pre-infusion time.
yeah. And I think each different type of coffee will react differently to your pre-infusion time, your pre-infusion pressure, and you can actually often change the flavor notes of your coffee with just your pre-infusion time and your pre-infusion pressure. Is that right?
Uh, yes, that is correct. But with the entry level machines, you won't be able to do that, because all that you would be doing, you would need to alter the brewing pressure. But maybe with the higher end machines, you may be able to do that. Um, so let's say, for example, let's take the E61 group head. Some people like to if you imagine the whole group, some people would like to pull the small lever halfway. So basically, you are limiting the amount of pressure of the water coming out. So they would only lift it halfway, count to, I don't know, 5 or 6, and and then um, and then they activate the pull pressure of the pump, and then they brew. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
I see. Okay, great. Is there an opportunity for you right now to? I know your special machine actually has a feature for pre-infusion. So is
Uh,
there any opportunity at this time?
yep, there is an opportunity, but I think do before I do any demonstrations, I think I will just quickly go through how the pre-infusion works on my Londinium one, which is also known as L1. So the L1 is a spring lever machine, and the way the pre-infusion works is when I lift the lever down, it takes the water from the boiler and it fills up the group head. And the pressure at which the water comes in from the boiler, that is the pre-infusion pressure. Because as soon as when I pull the lever down, the water is just going to come shooting out of the group head, and that is how it. So that is how the brewing and so that is how the pre-infusion and the brewing actually works. And the brewing works by the lever pressing onto the water. So now I'll just walk over to my machine and I'll just demonstrate how the pre-infusion works.
No problem. It sounds like you're cooking up a storm in your kitchen there, so it's okay.
Yep. So please do bear with me. Okay. So you see my machine now. So I've got my porting filter. So I've got my porting filter inside. So there's nothing. So I'll just put that to one side. Okay. So the way this machine works is this screw peg. So there's a pipe inside, and that lifts off straight into the boiler, and that is where the water comes. But this screw peg is not connected directly to the boiler. It has something called a thermosiphon system, and not to go into the details, all that does is it just keeps the group head warm, so that maintains the temperature of the group head. And so there's a pipe that goes straight into the boiler. So this group head is not in any way connected directly to the boiler, or it is, but the water just comes from the boiler, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Okay. So when I pull the lever, so because this is a spring lever machine, the spring currently is uncompressed. So it is actually blocking the water outlet where the water is coming. So at the moment in the boiler, my machine is on, the water is hot, the water wants to move, but it cannot move because the spring or the piston is actually blocking out the water. But if I pull the lever, you would actually see water coming out. So I pull, and then that's the water. And there's the pump.
Now, with the water coming out while you pull just now, was that, like, is there a pre-infusion pressure that it's a different profile for your machine, or is it all just the same pressure?
So the pressure of that is at the boiler pressure. So at the moment, if you see this white thing, so if you see this this meter,
yeah.
So that indicates what is the boiler pressure at the moment. So at the moment it's set to between about 1.1 to 1.4 bars. So that would be the pre-infusion.
I see.
And then in terms of the pressure, so the brewing pressure, that comes from the spring of this lever machine. So that is how spring lever. So that is how spring lever machines work. So if I pull the lever again, the water is coming out at at the moment it's at 1.3 bars of pressure. So that is the pre-infusion pressure. That is the pre-infusion pressure.
I see. So when you pull the lever down all the way, right? It's going to be at that constant 1.2, 1.3 bar pressure.
Yes.
So that's considered your pre-infusion time, right? From the time that you pull the lever down all the way to the bottom. Is that correct?
Yep. So let's say if I lock. So let's say that now I'm going to pull a shot. I would simply lock it in. And usually what I would do, I would then activate the steam just so that I would kick off a boiler cycle. So in other words, I would make this red light turn on. Now that it's gone off, so now it is at its highest. It is at its highest boiler pressure. So hence I could get the maximum pre-infusion. So as you say, when I pull the lever down, water comes out. So as soon as when I pull the lever down, water starts gushing out, and because of the coffee that I have inside, the group head will start filling up, and that is a pre-infusion. The coffee bed in here would become saturated. So I usually pre-infuse for about 6 seconds, just so that the coffee could expand. And then when I'm ready, then I pull the lever back up, and that is when I activate the brewing pressure.
I see. Okay, great. Are you able to adjust the pre-infusion pressure on your machine, and are you able to adjust the pre-infusion time?
I'll say I can adjust the pre-infusion pressure, but that would mean I would need to play around with the P-stat, which is I would need to control, which I would need to alter so that the maximum pressure of the boiler. But I don't want to do that because it would become too fiddly.
Right.
So I would leave the P-stat alone. But what I can control is how long I leave the lever down.
Right. So the longer you leave the lever down, the longer your pre-infusion time, right?
Yeah. So if I pull this lever down and I hold it for 10 seconds, and then water would be coming out of this group head for 10 seconds, and it would be saturating the pump for 10 seconds. But usually I find the sweet spot is about 6 seconds, as also being recommended by people who use the L1.
Right. Wow, sounds like a pretty fantastic machine that you have there, and it's able to, create a different variable for you to bring out the different flavor notes from your coffee, right?
Yep. So this is one of the things that I like about the L1 is that it's a spring lever machine, and I could just use and it's just by using the lever just to deliver the traditional espresso. So that is what I like about this machine. But saying that, I know this machine soon there will be like an enhancement kit that will come with it, where I would be able to increase the pre-infusion pressure.
Oh, nice.
So basically, this is still in the works with the people at Londinium Espresso who sells these machines. So basically, what they want to do, they want to change a bit of the internals where rather than having the pre-infusion to be set by the boiler, it would be set by a separate component, which would yield to a higher pre-infusion, and a higher pre-infusion would allow me to get the most out of shots from a bigger dose. So
Right.
so let's say right now the stock L1, it pulls fantastic shots if you're pulling shots from 15 or 18 grams. But if you want to have bigger shots with a dose of, let's say, 22 grams, you would tend to struggle. People could still pull great shots from it, but it will need a lot of work. Well, not work, but sort of like more skill, or sort of like, or the ability to. Does that make sense?
because the only thing that you can set or adjust or control is the pre-infusion time, right? The longer you hold the lever down, the longer it's going to pre-infuse. However, the bar pressure is generally the same, right, throughout your whole pre-infusion time.
Oh yeah, So the pre-infusion would be quite constant. But saying that, since at the moment with my L1, it is set to boiler pressure, so it depends on if my the boiler would cool down. So it would only cool down by, I don't know, about 0.1 of a bar. So that's not going to affect much. But if it suddenly drops a whole bar, and then something definitely is going wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
great. So is that kind of like the kit that you mentioned? Is that going to be like a kit that you retrofit onto your L1, or is it like
so
how involved is it?
so so it is going. So it is like an enhancement kit. So it is something that, yeah. So as you say, you could retrofit it. It is not yet available to L1 owners yet because it is still in development. But yeah, but the yields of it but the benefits of it is that you could have a high pre-infusion, which would allow you to basically get the most out of bigger doses.
Yeah. And the other thing that I found for while researching about our my semi-automatic espresso machine that I want to buy is that I've seen some of the more of the Gaja classics and some of the even the Ranchillo Silvias that people actually have modified a unit in there so that it has a pressure profiling feature. So it'll pre-infuse for a certain amount of time for 2 bar, and then it'll go up to 9 bar for another 20 seconds or whatever it is, and then it'll come back down to like 2 bar or 5 bar at the very end to finish off your shot. So I found that very interesting that a lot of people uh, realized what and how important pre-infusion is when you are pulling espresso, right?
Yep, I think pre-infusion would definitely help um, with getting the most out of the flavors of your coffee.
Yeah,
Um,
for
so yeah,
sure.
so I think it is something that would definitely help. And yeah, and even from entry levels machines, you could still have manual pre-infusion. So even though you would be pre-infusing at brewing pressure, but that shouldn't really that shouldn't really be that shouldn't be detrimental. Um, yeah.
Question here. In terms of controlling pre-infusion time for more of the entry-level espresso machines, is it a good way to control pre-infusion time longer and shorter by your tamping pressure? So, for example, if you tamped harder, now your water that's coming out of your espresso machine, it'll take longer for it to pass through the bed of coffee, therefore increasing the pre-infusion time. Like, and if you and conversely, if you tamp with less pressure, the pre-infusion time will be shorter, right? So, do you think that's a good way of controlling it, or is it more about flipping the switch on and off and then letting the coffee saturate?
Um, I think when you tamp hard, like let's say if you tamp harder, all that you are doing, you are increasing the resistance. So on an entry level machine, if you hit the brew button and then you turn it off, because there's no consistency in the pre-infusion, all that you are just doing, you're just letting water sit. If you tamp, let's say if you tamp too hard and the water cannot penetrate. So let's say if you did penetrate it, so if the water was able to be so if the water did penetrate a bit into the coffee, but then you turn off the switch, all that you're just doing is you are just blooming that portion of the coffee. Whereas if you tamp as normal and you are able to let the water touch as much of the coffee, and then you turn off the brew pressure, and then you turn off the brew button, then you will still be able to saturate the whole pack because that is what you want to do. You want to wet the whole coffee bed.
Right. So it's a bad way to control pre-infusion time through tamp, is what you're saying.
In other words, yes, that is well. It's more risky if you want to if you want to do it that way.
Okay.
So so if you want to control the pre-infusion, I would say tamp is normal, and then just experiment how long you want to turn on the brew button for before you turn it off.
Excellent. Awesome. So that's really good insight, Alex. Thanks for showing us your machine with the pre-infusion feature and explaining why you should have pre-infusion and how you can get proper pre-infusion from your machines. So do you have any other comments?
I think pre-infusion. I think with my machine, I think pre-infusion is basically a step that I have to do, given the nature of the spring lever. So basically, no matter if I want to do pre-infusion or not, I have to do it. But saying that, I could choose not to do it. So all that I would just do, I would just pull the lever down and then immediately lift it back up.
Right.
So that would be the equivalent of just hitting the brew button straight away.
Right.
But
Right.
saying that, I find that pre-infusion would also help with extracting the flavors of the coffee and getting the most out of your cup, your
Excellent.
resulting cup.
Excellent. So yeah, so everyone who has any questions about pre-infusion, please leave it in the comments below. If you like our video, please hit the like button and don't be afraid to subscribe for more videos. Thanks, Alex, for your time today.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Okay, bye.